This is The Express with Gary Allen, your 360-degree view of the world. Now, here's your host, Gary Allen.
Okay, before we get into tonight's show, I just want to remind everybody how you can get a hold of us and how you can talk to us here. You can keep up with me on Facebook. I'm hearing a little bit of an echo there, EW, but you can get a hold of me on Facebook at Gary Allen, A-L-A-N. You can also listen to this show as well as all our other past shows on YouTube.com, Gary Allen The Express. Thursday night, this program will repeat itself as all our shows do on DiversityBroadcastNetwork.com at 7 p.m. Progressive Voices, as well as if you are in TuneIn, you can go there and put on your favorites TMV Cafe and listen to us anytime you want. Tonight's guest is a gentleman who's been with us before, Mr. Kevin Bowen. He's the radio and TV personality for my favorite football team in the whole world, and I know certainly his, the Indianapolis Colts. But before we get too far with that, let me just say also he's a graduate of Indiana University. He's also in charge of their websites with the Colts. He's a reporter, and he stays very close to what's going on, not only with the Colts, but with the entire NFL. Kevin, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thanks for having me, Gary. I appreciate it.
Well, little minor glitches, but we're getting there. You know, for people who haven't listened to you before or weren't aware that this is your second visit, I know you went, like I said, you graduated from Indiana University. Why did you pick sports journalism? Always a sports junkie when you were growing up?
Yeah, definitely. I had a strong passion from it ever since really I can remember back to my elementary years. I can even recall waking up early in the mornings when I was in elementary school and you know, trying to learn like math by looking at the box scores from NBA games or MLB games and kind of adding it up, you know, through that. And so I think sports has always been an extreme passion for me. And then I think growing up in central Indiana when, you know, the Pacers had some very impressive teams in the 90s and early 2000s, and then the Colts, those early Peyton Manning years as well. I think being a part of that, kind of growing up in that culture, definitely made it very, very appealing. So I've been fortunate with how things have worked out for sure.
Well, how did you I know how you got on with the Colts. You were an intern, but how did you pick the Colts, or did you intern for other pro teams in the Indiana area? And also, too, I know you did college baseball, football, basketball, etc. But how was it that you were lucky enough to land with the Colts?
Yeah, I was pretty fortunate. My my older brother had interned in their accounting department. He's about 5 years older than I am, and so he had some connections with their, you know, the organization in general, not just the accounting department. And so when I was a junior at IU, they needed some help in the press box on game days, transcribing post-game quotes. So definitely wasn't the most entertaining job by any means, but it was a great experience just to be in a NFL locker room after every game. And so I'd go into, typically it'd be the home locker room. I'd go in, and that was my junior year of college. At the same time, when I was at IU, I was doing some radio and some written stuff for the Indiana Daily Student, the college newspaper down there. So that experience coupled with the Colts led to another internship in my senior year with them up at training camp. And then I drove up from Bloomington to Indianapolis. Bloomington is where IU is located. It's about an hour and 15 minutes. And drove up every Monday and Wednesday fall semester my senior year. And that turned into a then full season internship once I graduated and a full-time job after that. So, again, very, very fortunate to get that first opportunity with the Colts as a junior. And it's kind of crazy now looking back on it, now as you mentioned it, how the roles evolved, really a ton, and media in general has evolved a lot since I first started.
And it has to be quite an upswing from when you did college. I know that I did some high school football a couple of years ago, and I did some collegiate sports, but being surrounded by a professional team, and I also did some arena football as a sideline reporter, I know that there is a major jump in how much the media is given and exactly how much information is doled out at any given time as well. So, how was that for you, the jump? It's sort of like going from college football as a player to pro football as a player. It's a major, major jump. How was it for you?
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing that I benefited from was covering the IU basketball team my senior year. And obviously it is on a totally different level, college sports, to professional sports, especially the NFL, but the passion that Indiana University's fan base has for their basketball program, I really think is close to being unmatched in college basketball. I mean, they are up there with the blue blood programs of a Kansas or a Duke or a Kentucky. And so that, I think, helped out because that was Tom Crean's fourth year down there. IU made the Sweet 16 that year. They beat 3 top 5 teams, including Kentucky, who was number 1. So you did have some exposure to, big media settings and a fan base that read your work and were very passionate about their team and the work that you provided. But then going to the NFL and having all the extra access that you did is something that really was eye-opening. That was crazy to me how, in college you would get the coach for, 15 minutes before the day before a game, and you get, a couple players, and the, sports information director would be the one picking those players. Well, in the NFL, it's open locker room for an hour, 4 days a week, and you get a post-game locker room that's open, and the coach talks for, 15, 20 minutes, 4 or 5 days a week. So the access to professional sports, I think, is a big reason why the game is so popular, and it's fun being able to tell these guys stories, obviously what they do on the field, those 60 minutes every Sunday, but then also being able to tell a little bit of their background and kind of the human element that a lot of these guys obviously have.
Are there players that you've interviewed over the years or players you've wanted to interview, whether they were with the Colts or in college, that just really didn't want to talk at all? Now, I know Marvin Harrison was not a person to get in front of the camera or in front of the microphone and really wanting to talk. He was recently on the NFL Network with a friend of mine who's been on this show, who will be on again, Brian Baldinger. And I know Marvin can talk, and he's highly educated, but he's not exactly Mr. Outgoing. Have you run across a lot of that, other than when a team loses? And I know Coach Pagano is open to talking, but are there times when you see that look on their face and you go, I think I'll wait until 20 minutes from now before I approach them?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I think a lot of it is in that losing locker room. I mean, you do get in there and you see these guys kind of raw emotions come out, and you don't know how they're going to react. I think that's part of the business that you got to learn, and hopefully, these players can, in the heat of the moment, I know it's much easier said than done, they can realize that, okay, the reason I make X amount of money and have signed these contracts is because I need to give my, 10 minutes, whatever it is, after the game, win or lose.
Right.
And I would say for the most part, yeah. And again, I primarily work in the Colts locker room. I would say well over 90% of the players are very helpful in that and do realize that being a professional, there's good that comes with the bad, and there's bad that comes with the good. So you got to be there after the wins. You got to be there after the losses as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, I can't really think of too many. I know Reggie Wayne wasn't a guy that talked a lot, but when he did, and Fridays was typically his day to talk, it was must see because he was a guy that was very insightful, had a ton of veteran experience, which is something that was big for this team when kind of the new regime started in 2012 with Chuck Pagano and Ryan Gregson. So Reggie could provide that perspective of a guy that had been there for a decade plus, had won a Super Bowl, but then at the same time, he was now part of this new culture with so many different faces around him. So he is kind of the one guy that has kind of been, again, he didn't talk a ton in terms of quantity, but he was always a must listen interview-wise.
Well, us UM guys, we don't talk much off the field, but when we get on the field, we kind of show our expertise there. I will tell you that.
Definitely.
I got into a somewhat of an argument with a woman because we were talking about, Mark Richt is now the head coach of the University of Miami, and that's my alma mater, and we got talking about it, and she really was like a spoiled person over the fact that Rick left. She said, well, he'll lead you so far, but he'll only do, he won't take you over the edge, and he won't get you a championship. And I'm like, well, lady, compared to what we've had, he's certainly an upswing, and I think he's going to do great for us. And I think her husband said, it's a little sour grape. She really liked him and the fact that he went to Miami, but he's from Miami. That's where he played college ball. And I know Coach Pagano coached at the U, and I know over the years you and I have talked about the different guys that played for the U that have been part of the Colts. since Reggie Wayne, and long before that, even Ted Hendricks, way back. He was a University of Miami guy. So I have a little bit of a love for all the guys. So I wish they would bring Reggie back as a coach to coach wide receivers. I don't know. Maybe he's not interested in that, but boy, he could certainly teach some of these young fellas some of the things. T.Y. could certainly learn from him, and so could the other wideouts that we have too. Before go ahead.
Yeah, I think Reggie being a coach, I think is something that has been mentioned by a lot of fans, and they're curious to see what he does because he is, I think, is a great football mind, and I know NFL Network has used him a couple times during the playoffs last year to come on set and talk, and of course his connection with Peyton Manning was a big reason why. But I do remember talking to Reggie last July. He was back in Indy for a charity event.
Mm-hmm.
He kind of mentioned just this family time is something that he's never had. And his family lived in Miami when he played here in Indianapolis. Just going to take his kid to tennis lessons or going to take one of his kids and go to their parent-teacher conferences. And that's something that he never could do on a consistent basis when he played in the NFL. So I think that early family time is something that he's really going to cherish here. You can always get back into coaching. It's not like Ed Reed, who immediately pretty much retired from the game and went right into coaching now with the Bills. I think it's something with Reggie. It's okay, spend a little time with the family. You can still get into coaching, in your late 30s, early 40s. And obviously he has enough clout around the league to where I think he's going to be pretty high demand to get some sort of coaching, job if that's the route that he wants to take. So Reggie might be gone, but Frank Gore, Phil Dorsett, there's some very, very key Miami Hurricanes on this Colts team here in 2016.
Well, you can't win a championship without a Kane,
Of course not. Of course not.
That's just my opinion, of course. But here's the thing, too. I think he's down helping out some of the wide receivers at Miami now, as a matter of fact. All right, I would be remiss if I didn't ask this question. I talked to you about it the other day on the phone. And by the way, I wanted to say it during the introduction before I get into this question. Not only is this young man that we're talking to, Kevin Bowen from the Indianapolis Colts, a Colt fan, but this weekend, I guess you're going to be traveling a little, I don't know if it's east, west, or south, but you're also becoming a car aficionado, huh?
Yes, the 100th run in the Indy 500 on Sunday afternoon. And so, growing up in central Indiana, you definitely get introduced to racing, at least during the month of May. And so I think the city obviously is very excited for it, anticipating, upwards of 350,000 fans into that venue on Sunday morning. So it'll be crazy to see that many people inside of that 2.5 mile oval. So I'm definitely looking forward to it. I think there will be a little Colts flavor there. I think a couple players will be down there doing some pre-race activities as well. So
what are you doing?
For the month of May, I think player-wise, I think Andrew Luck has been a guy that I know has dropped the green flag in past years. Right. So I think he could be down there pre-race, maybe T.Y. Hilton as well. So I think with the 100th running, it's pretty remarkable how Indy's kind of transformed really the whole month of May into inviting really the greatest spectacle in racing. This is a true world event with how many international racers that you do have among the 33 guys in the field. So definitely looking forward to Sunday. I think it speaks for everybody here in Indy, crossing our fingers that we can get some pretty good weather. Now, if you think back to the 2012 Super Bowl, Indianapolis had great weather for that. So hopefully they can dial up some good vibes from Mother Nature again when the whole world is watching.
Yeah, that'd be great. And if you take a couple of the cheerleaders down, that would certainly won't hurt either now, will it?
It will not at all. I'm sure that'll attract a few eyes.
I envy you, and I've told you this before. I would just, when I come up to visit you, and that probably won't be too far down the line, I want to meet some of the ladies because I think the Colt cheerleaders are the prettiest ladies in all the NFL, and that's just my opinion. I'm just saying. I'm just putting it out there. Hey, how's Andrew doing? I mean, there are reports you hear, he's not 100% yet. He's still got a lot of healing to do. And in conjunction with that, how's the O-line looking now with the draft picks? With Ryan being drafted, I mean, are they connecting? Are they gelling like Saturday and Manning did?
Yeah, today was the second open media session that the media members have had this offseason, OTA number 5 for the Colts. Andrew Luck has participated in just about every first-team rep that he always has, and has thrown the whole gamut of throws, short, medium, long. T.Y. Hilton has definitely been a guy that has impressed Chuck Pagano a lot. Chuck was pretty outspoken today, just the type of offseason that Hilton has had. And, Hilton's a guy himself that I thought has always practiced very well at training camp every year. He really puts on a show seemingly every day at practice. And he had his moments today. And I think, again, a part of that is he was a little frustrated last year. Last season didn't go anywhere near how Hilton wanted it to go. This is a guy that signed a big contract just prior to the start of the 2015 season. And he was catching quarterbacks from, or catching balls from quarterbacks, Luck and Hasselbeck and Charlie Whitehurst and Josh Freeman and Ryan Lindley. I mean, it was crazy just how many quarterbacks the Colts had last year when you think about how fortunate they've been as a franchise to really only have, two quarterbacks for well over a decade and a half. So, yeah, I think Andrew Luck is fully healthy, no limitations there, which is good when you're installing a new offense. You need your starting quarterback out there. And then from an O-line standpoint, Ryan Kelly has taken every first team rep at center that we have seen. So I think you're going to see that duo play for a long, long time together. Just watching Kelly and his body language and everything non-whistle to whistle just screams pro out of him. I think he handles everything very well. I think Alabama prepared him very well for that. It's a guy that started at center for 3 years for 3 different quarterbacks, played for 3 different offensive coordinators. So he's dealt with a lot of adversity. Might not be the right word because when you think of Alabama football, you don't really think of adversity per se, but he's dealt with a lot of different voices down there. I think that's going to help him make the transition to the NFL. And I fully expect Kelly and Luck to be the starting duo in terms of center quarterback. And it's big shoes to fill and putting them in the same company as Manny and Saturday. But I think the early groundwork is there for that duo.
Let's get into a couple of the stories that are headlines for the last couple of days. First of all, let's talk about the story that just won't seem to go away, and that's, of course, the Tom Brady. He's appealing his 4-game suspension. Now, I have a different take on it than maybe some people do. I don't know. I know that Tom is an intense player. I know that if this had happened to Peyton Manning, he'd be the same way. He wants to play. But I'm beginning to wonder where, by dragging this on and on and on, is he doing it because he doesn't want to lose the 4 games? I don't think he cares whether he's guilty or innocent of Inflategate. I think that was blown out of proportion to begin with anyway, Adam. Kevin, excuse me, Adam. But I don't quite understand the whole thing about this. Take the 4 games and the heck with it. But at the very same time, I think he wants to play the 4 games. He knows how important they are. The AFC East has improved every team there. But if he wins his case and he has no suspension at all whatsoever, doesn't this put another black eye on Roger Goodell's resume to the point where it opens Pandora's box and they're going to have to find a new commissioner? I mean, because he's lost some of these cases left and right. He won't have any authority anymore if he loses this one. I think this is going to be a very interesting case to see what happens. And the NFLPA is not back down at all. Of course, they're not going to back down when it's arguably the biggest star in the game right now. And people say 4 games is only 4 games, but I mean, you start putting that into percentage of games over the course of the regular season. I mean, that's 25% of the season. I mean, can you imagine if LeBron James was out for 20 games? Can you imagine if Mike Trout was out for 40 games? I mean, that is a large chunk of a year. And you mentioned it earlier, the AFC East is getting better. The Jets should have been in the playoffs last year. I was surprised that I think if Tyrod Taylor doesn't get hurt, I think Buffalo would have challenged for a wild card spot, and Miami is hoping that Adam Gase kind of turns some things around there with some younger skill guys. So I do think that's where the 4 games really comes into play. And Brady knows the clock is ticking a little bit in terms of him consistently challenging for Super Bowls. He can't play forever, so you're out 4 games. All of a sudden, if you go 2-2 in that stretch, and no one knows how Jimmy Garoppolo would play, then all of a sudden, New England, instead of being that team that
is playing for a bye week every time. It seems like in the month of December, they're now fighting for a wild card spot possibly. So I think that's the biggest thing. And in terms of the NFL, this is one that they need to get right because it is so widely publicized.
Yeah.
And Goodell, I think that's why the NFL has fought it as long as they have, and the NFLPA has fought it as long as they have. You can't have one of your star players in such a magnified case and not have the credibility that is necessary to run, really the most popular sport, I think, definitely in this country.
Well, which brings me to the next question, and you and I talked about this the other day, and of course, I'm very disturbed by this, and I know you are, and I wonder how some of the players in the Colt locker room are. But apparently the NFL, at least a half a dozen top NFL health officials, waged an improper behind-the-scenes campaign last year to influence a major U.S. government research study on football and brain disease. Congressional investigators have concluded in a new report obtained by ESPN Outside the Lines that the NFL pulled some funding from this research for CTE, which is part of the concussionary protocol. They came out with a message today. I saw that the late Bubba Smith, who played for the Baltimore Colts, also suffered from CTE. What is the NFL doing? On the one hand, they say we care about our players, but on the other hand, they're saying behind the scenes, you're expendable. We can find a bunch of guys to come in here and play this game, which leads me to the major question of the day. What do you think? What do the players in the Colt locker room think? And what is the NFL to do? They've got this has been a bad week so far as publicity is concerned.
Yeah, I think when you look at players around the league, they do take notice. They see these reports. They saw the New York Times article from a couple months ago, and they do see some of their fellow players speaking out, or guys that are retiring, maybe earlier than expected. And Tyler Varga, who's a backup running back for the Colts, they had kind of a bigger story in the Indy Star a couple of weeks ago about his concussion that he suffered in week 3 last season, and just kind of all the remedies that he had to go through, and different types of medication. Now he just did not feel right for months and months. Now he is back and participating in the off-season program, but I think that was real, and I think it's starting to get very real because more and more people are speaking out, past players, of course, but also, when you have your fellow colleagues and guys that or players that on certain teams and their friends or whatnot, I think that's when it gets very, very real for these guys. And for the NFL, I think you got to take a long, hard look at, what are you doing at the grassroots level? What are you doing to the safety of the game, starting, Pee-wee and high school and so on and so forth? Because not only are NFL players taking notice, but, think about all the mothers around America that are maybe having second thoughts about their kids playing the game of football or waiting a lot longer for their kids to play tackle football. I think you're seeing a lot of leagues, around the U.S., maybe they're playing flag football a couple of years later than they normally would. Maybe when I was a kid, or some of these guys that are in their 30s in the NFL, maybe when they were playing Pee-wee football. So I think that is the biggest thing for the NFL is currently, yes, you have your troubles, but you really have got to start making inroads into high school, junior highs, and, Pop Warner leagues to where, player safety, what you do from inventing, I think safer helmets has got to be, that has to be something that money is continually pumped into and funded, because I think that is an area that you can, really make some big advancements in. So, yes, I think there are some issues right now, and I don't see it particularly all of a sudden cleaning up overnight. It's something that is going to take a lot of time, and I think the biggest thing that the NFL has to do is they really have to hit that grassroots level of the game, because that is the future of the game, and that's really the only the only way this game is going to stay as popular as it's been, is if they continually can prove that it's a safe game and you're able to get the most talented players.
Yeah, and Eric Winston, the president of the NFL Players Association, said today that the NFL obviously can't be trusted to protect their own players. Now, here's some statistics, Kev, that I've got. In 2012, this is just in the NFL now, the ones that were reported. We don't know about the ones that weren't reported. But just in the NFL, concussions, 171 in 2012. In 13, 152. In 14, it went down to 123. In 15, it was almost 200. And they haven't even stopped counting part of the 2016 season, which will be up and coming. This doesn't send a very good message. And I find, I don't know about where you grew up in Indiana, what you're hearing from the coaches there as far as a high school or college, but I'm finding more and more kids are walking away from football and maybe playing baseball or basketball or another sport, figuring I don't need this to go to college. And at some point, if they don't do something about this, I was really good friends with a gentleman named Dave Duerson who played for the Chicago Bears. And I know towards the end of Dave's life, he complained of headaches. He couldn't remember things. I'm really good friends with some of the former Miami Dolphins as well that are going through very similar problems. But if the NFL doesn't come up and own up to this and say, look, we're part of this problem. We need to help solve it instead of pulling away from research studies just because somebody is part of that research study that they don't like, which is why they pulled the money from it to begin with, or half of the money. They're going to diminish the game to a point 15 or 20 years from now that the game's not going to exist.
No, I could not agree more. I think it's a very, very real issue. And like you said, whether it's Dave Duerson or, some of these other former players, or again, I think more and more when you're seeing these current players, that to me is where the major red flag. And I think that's where the NFL has to have some serious, self look in the mirror and say, okay, what are we really going to do about this? How can we make this game as safe as possible while still keeping the entertainment value at a reasonable level? And I think some of the rule changes that you've seen, whether that is, moving the kickoff up or, some of the little things like that are baby steps. But then again, it goes back to the grassroots level, and it goes back to, I think, you really have to get to a lot of, coaches and how are you teaching the game? I know the Seahawks, it's been widely publicized how Pete Carroll has been a huge advocate of rugby-style tackling. That's something that they have taught out there where, obviously you're taking the helmet and the crown of the helmet, so you aren't able to use it as a weapon per se. So I think that is something that I think more and more coaching staff, they can be introduced to. And I think once you get more and more of those younger coaches that eventually will make their way into the NFL, I think you will start to slowly see, this subtle change in how the game is taught, really starting at the Pop Warner level and carried on through, every level of football.
Right. I remember having Bruce Laird on the program, former Baltimore Colt defensive back, saying, Gary, we come at each other 35 miles an hour, 40 times a game. He said, eventually something's got to give with the noggin. We're talking to Kevin Bowen, who is the radio and TV personality for the Indianapolis Colts and also a good friend of mine. Let's get by the way, Roger Goodell had a press conference today because I guess they were having some meetings and they changed a couple of the rules, and we're going to go over those in a little bit. But he said he hadn't even read the report yet, which I find baffling. You're the commissioner of the NFL, and you're telling us, the press and everybody else, I haven't read this report that came out a couple of days ago. Actually, I think it came out last Wednesday or Thursday is when you and I originally talked about it. And he hasn't read it yet. I mean, what does that tell you about the commissioner?
Yeah, I think it's one of those, if he can try to get away from it, he's going to get away from it. So he knows that that's really the last time he has to talk. I can't think of another time that the commissioner will have to talk because league meetings are pretty much done until the fall, I want to say. I don't think there's a summer league meeting in the NFL. So I think that was kind of, his way to, maybe he doesn't have all the facts, or the NFL obviously has to have their own rebuttal. And I think what we've seen lately is just, a lot of, okay, this is our stance on it from the NFL. This is our stance on it from the New York Times or whoever is doing the reporting. So right. I think that was more of a just let's collect the facts before, I stand up here and, more of a PR thing than anything.
Yeah, I do too. But, this is a very serious situation. More and more players, as we move forward, will be coming forward with this. More and more players will be retiring early. And I think parents will stop their kids from playing high school football or peewee football, realizing, there are other sports. By the way, I just want to say hello to Randy Jones out there. Randy, thank you so much for tuning in. We got started off a little late tonight. For those of you out there that are just wondering what happened the first 6 or 7 minutes here, we're just kind of moving along. Let's move on to something else that I found quite interesting because other teams have gone to Europe or to England, and I guess the Colts are going this year. Is that a home game that they're taking away from you guys, or are you the visitors?
That is a road game against the Jaguars. It's the Jaguars' home game. It'll be October 2nd in Wembley Stadium.
See, now why don't guys just save each other a trip and just put a W by the Colts and let the Jaguars have a week off?
Oh, I don't know. You remember what happened last year when those two teams met down there in Jacksonville? That was a game that turned very quickly for the Colts, and the Jaguars looked really, really impressive in that game. So yeah, I think now the AFC South, similar to the AFC East or other divisions around the football, this is not just going to be the laughing stock division, if you will. It's a team that I think every team in the division has now found their quarterback of the future. And yes, Andrew Luck's the only one that's thrown a postseason pass of Brock Osweiler, Marcus Mariota, and Blake Bortles. But I think these are three teams that are definitely the arrows pointing up for all of them. How do
you feel about a team on a permanent basis in England? I just don't see it. I don't see it. I just don't.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, logistically, I think it's going to be very, very difficult. I mean, just from a team standpoint, how are you going to really attract free agents, and then not to mention the course of a 16-game season. I think one step that you're going to see this year to seeing if a team can be in London permanently or at least for, several weeks and play games, multiple weeks in a row over there is the Colts are actually denied having the bye week after their London game. So the Colts play over there in week 4 against Jacksonville. They will come back in week 5 and play the Bears at home. And it's the first time that any team has gone over there in the international series, which I think started in 2007, and has not had their bye week be the week following the game in London. So the Colts just felt like that was too early in the schedule, which, it is very, very early. An early October bye is a bye that nobody wants. So the Colts will then have their bye week in early November. So I think that is a little bit of a case study that now, teams are going to say, and the NFL is going to say, okay, is this like flying, is this like Oakland playing at Buffalo and then Buffalo just flying, or Oakland flying home after the game? And that's, I think, that's kind of what the Colts thinking is. It's okay, a couple of years ago, you played San Diego on Monday Night Football out in San Diego, lost that game. You flew back, played Denver on Sunday night, Peyton Manning's first game back at Lucas Oil, and that's probably one of the best games that Chuck Pagano's team has played in his 4 seasons here as a coach. So it'll be a little bit of a test, but I still just cannot see it right now, a team being over there on a permanent basis. We sit here today, I just think the logistics of it are too hard.
Jet lag is the only thing that comes to mind. Jet lag, going and maybe not going so much because it's like when you go to Las Vegas, you gain 3 hours. But coming back is when it's really going to kill you. And I think that's really going to kill every team that's gone over there that I've read anything about. They said, yeah, it took us about 10 days after that trip to really get back into playing mode as far as our brains were concerned. So I suppose we will see what happens. Let's talk a little bit about the draft. I know the Colts went O-line heavy. Talk about some of the surprises, not necessarily with the Colts, but with some of the other teams that you saw. And by the way, I was so pleased to see the 2 players that were injured finally get picked on day 2, right off the bat within the first 3 or 4 picks. And I was so happy for both of those gentlemen because they both sat there, with injuries, which could have very easily held them off to the 4th or 5th or 6th or even free agency. Talk about maybe some of the things that you really enjoyed about the draft and talk about maybe a couple of your disappointments.
Yeah, I was actually up for the draft on Thursday night for round 1, and obviously the Laramie Tunsil thing was something that no one saw coming. I mean, you can't even script that, really. Just how his night unfolded and how many people had him, penciled in as the number 1 prospect in this draft, and all of a sudden he falls down to 13 all the way down to Miami, and that whole, snafu or whatever you even want to call it, it's just was a crazy story. But from a Colts standpoint, and I think really an NFL standpoint, it's hard not to like what the Jaguars did. And I know Jalen Ramsey, has a meniscus injury, and his a little bit in jeopardy, kind of his status for training camp. But I don't think there's any denying that from just a pure football player standpoint, Jalen Ramsey might be the top player in this draft. And so for them to get him at 5 and then get Miles Jack early in the second round, if that knee can hold up and he doesn't need microfracture surgery, Jacksonville's just gotten arguably 2 of the top 5 players in the draft.
Yeah.
And now you couple that with what you have on the offensive side of the ball, and I think Jacksonville could make a jump from, again, it's going to have to be a big jump because they've perennially been a top 5 selecting team, and now you're asking them to go from 5 wins to 10 wins. That's a lot to ask for. But I was very impressed by what Jacksonville did. I thought they made the most splashes this offseason when you couple their free agency and what they got there with all the money that they had to spend. And that's what you have to do. And I think that's what, Philly and that's what LA is hoping they can do is, can you build around a young quarterback on a rookie contract? That's so key for teams nowadays.
Right.
And Jacksonville is hoping they can do it with Bortles. Tennessee's hoping they can do it with Mariota. And now the Rams and the Eagles are going to try the same. So I'm not 100% sold on Goff and Wentz being the guy, but these are 2 teams that haven't been able to find the guy here in the past handful of years. So that's why they pretty much mortgage a substantial amount of their draft to move up there and take the quarterbacks 1 and 2.
Yeah, here we talked about this off the air a little bit too. I mean, how can you get a quarterback, a first-round guy, to go to the Rams? Now they're back in Los Angeles where you weren't even born, Kevin, when the Los Angeles Rams existed. I remember going out there. But, I mean, you got Jeff Fisher, who's the head coach, who hasn't been above 500 in how many years has he been coaching?
Yeah. I mean, he has been Mr. 500 throughout his career, whether that is at Tennessee or LA. And I will say, I think one benefit that Goff will have going to LA, and I do think obviously it's extremely big shoes for him to fill to kind of potentially be the face of that franchise along with Todd Gurley now, is when he does go there, he's going with the defense in place. I mean, that is a pretty good defense that the Rams have, and Todd Gurley, the best running back in the NFL, I think not named Adrian Peterson. I think he showed that last year. I think Gurley is going to be a star in this league for years to come. So you aren't asking him to go in there and be on most number 1 picking teams. LA was originally scheduled to pick 15th, and no team has moved all the way up to 1 from a lower spot in the draft than LA did. So I think that this is, the time is now. It's a new city. It's hard knocks. It's a very competitive division, and if Jeff Fisher wants to hang around much longer, he's got to start getting this team obviously above 500 and trying to be a 9 or 10 win team. And I will say, along with the Rams, I thought what Tennessee did was the right decision. You have Mariota, you have the franchise tackle in Taylor Lewan. When I think of the number 1 pick, in my mind, I think of a quarterback, I think of a stud tackle, or I think of really a game changer on the defensive side of the ball. Well, I don't think this draft had a clear consensus on who that game-changing defender was. So once that guy wasn't there, Tennessee trades back to 15. They get 6 picks in the first 76 selections. And I know those are just kind of obscure draft numbers, but when you break them down, I believe the stat was Dallas was the last team to have as many picks in the top 70, 80 picks. And they had it back in the early 90s. And 5 of those guys went on to start for their Super Bowl team. So I'm not crowning Tennessee by any means, but I thought it was the right move to do when you have the number 1 pick and you don't need a quarterback, you don't necessarily need a franchise tackle, and there's not a clear-cut guy on the defensive side of the ball. So it's a draft that had a lot of interesting trades from Tennessee and Cleveland moving down, and I'm very intrigued to see kind of how that all pans out as we move forward.
Well, the Browns had a lot of selections too. I think they had 14 total in the entire draft. I mean, but the Browns are the Browns.
Oh yeah.
I'm sorry, but the Browns are the Browns.
They are definitely the Browns, and they've revamped how they're going to run things from really top down. the whole sabermetrics thing that they're starting to bring in. And Andrew Barry, a guy who used to be very high in the Colts scouting department, has kind of moved over there as pretty much their player personnel guy, and he's only been in his late 20s. And Cleveland, I will give them credit. They aren't just sticking to what they've done. They totally revamped things. They've changed a lot of what they've done. You don't see teams have as many picks as they did this past April. So I think they pretty much hit the reset button, which is probably the smartest thing to do with the whole Manziel fiasco that they've been dealing with the past few years.
Oh, yeah. Free agency, it's been very calm for the most part. I know the Colts didn't do a lot in the free agency area this year. They brought in a lot of free agents right after the draft, but any particular reason why this year you think? I know why the Colts didn't do it. They just wanted to conserve their money and make sure, because after last year they kind of went crazy, and in my opinion, and most of those guys didn't even make the game day roster. But what do you anticipate? What are your reasons that you think that the free agency market has been so calm?
I think it goes back to, I think teams realize how the success rate in free agency, if you're batting 500, that is a miracle. I think teams know that it's a very big crapshoot. It is weird to see how much, I think more successful free agency is. Maybe in the NBA where you see guys go from team to team and still be pretty good players. You just don't see in the NFL. Teams realize how important it is drafting and developing your own. And I think the Colts have seen that firsthand. They have not shied away from that in talking this offseason, how important it is to develop going forward. Andrew Luck is about ready to hit that second contract. He's going to get paid, a substantial amount of money. Yeah. And you just don't have the same funds that you did. T.Y. Hilton is on his second contract. Dwayne Allen is on his second contract. Anthony Costanzo is on his second contract. So you don't have the money that you did when you went out and signed Andre Johnson and Frank Gore and Trent Cole. It's teams that have that young quarterback in place on their rookie contract. Yeah, they can get away with it, maybe isn't the right term, but they have the freedom. They feel like they can spend a little bit more, whereas once you sign that quarterback to that second deal, then you better draft and have those guys contribute early on their rookie contracts. So that's where you can have a little bit of leeway when it comes to salary cap.
Yeah, Mr. Irsay has indicated that he's going to make Andrew a top-paid quarterback in the NFL. I wonder how many books he's going to be able to buy now for his book club and keep that moving forward. And by the way, is he going to take up smoking the pipe now? Since he's now I know he was an intellectual coming out of Stanford. Doesn't he have a degree in architecture or something like that, which is not easy to get?
Right. No, he does, and like you said, he started a book club about a month ago. It's pretty ironic. I think the same day he started the book club, Johnny Manziel kind of turned himself in. So it's just crazy to see how some quarterbacks are dealing with that, and other quarterbacks like Andrew Luck. I guess there aren't too many quarterbacks. There might not be a single quarterback in the NFL that's ever started a book club at the peak of his career, but Andrew Luck's doing it. He is a rare breed, and I think the Colts are very, very fortunate and grateful that he's their guy under center for when his second contract is signed, and all signs point to that happening either later this offseason. It's not the end of the world if it extends into next year, because you could apply the franchise tag to him, but I think both parties want to get this done potentially before the start of the regular season.
Well, all I want to know, Kev, and I think you know the question, are we going to keep Andrew upright this year, and will somebody please come in and teach that boy how to slide?
And today, it was funny that you mentioned that. He actually had kind of a scramble play in practice. And again, nothing is too live right now. Guys are just in helmets and shorts, and of course the quarterbacks are wearing their red jerseys, but Luck did slide today, and it kind of brought kind of a funny little chuckle out of the media gathered there. And I think it is something that it's very instinctual, and it's hard, when a guy plays as competitively as Luck does. And, it's not like a golfer that okay, if I hit a 5-iron here, 5-iron's going to get me in the water, and that person hits 7-iron. It's not something that you can think and think and, spend time and pull out your yardage book and look at this and look at that. Or if you're a pitcher, just say, I'm not throwing a slider this time. It got me in trouble. I'm not throwing it to this batter because last time hit a home run off me. It's going to have to be instinctual for luck, and we'll find out, kind of what did 9 games on the sideline do to him, because I think one of his rare traits is that he's able to keep plays alive for so long, and some of his best plays as a pro have been that. So I think there is a fine line between totally deviating from all of that and at the same time, of course, wanting him to stay healthy. But you're right. The biggest key is protecting him, and Ryan Kelly's going to anchor that line from the middle of it day one. And I think having a center there that you can now count on week in and week out, which is not something Andrew Luck has ever had. He's had 5 different centers. I think that's going to go a long way in making that line more consistent. And I think people are pretty high on Joe Philbin as well as a line coach. I know he had his struggles down there in Miami, but when you look at his pedigree, coaching offensive linemen, the track record speaks for itself.
Yeah, he was successful with the O-line up at Green Bay, and I know, just between you and I and our listening audience, Kevin, as we often say, there's nobody that's going to be able to help the Miami Dolphins really get out of where they are. I'm telling you. So I keep hearing this background noise. I don't know what's going on. Let's talk about a quarterback who I think is just a spoiled kid who got a $40 million contract from the Philadelphia Eagles. They draft a guy, and suddenly he says, I'm not going to show up. I want to be traded. First of all, nobody guarantees you anything. And since I asked you to look this up, and I think you did, has he ever completed a 16-game season?
I don't believe so. Again, I think off the top of my head, I can't recall. I mean, he had injury problems coming out of Oklahoma. I mean, this is something that was not a slam dunk pick for the Rams, and obviously didn't work out. And he's had his struggles in Philadelphia. And I think, hearing the comments, I think Michael Bennett had some comments about Bradford. It's just, the type of kind of vibe you are giving now, that locker room. I mean, I think early on in his career, he was healthy. I think his rookie season in St. Louis. But after that, I mean, the injury bug has just bit him year after year after year, and especially the past couple of years. So, good for Philadelphia going out and drafting Carson Wentz. And you don't draft a guy number 2 overall and have him sit for very long. So, yeah, if I'm Philly, I know those fans they won't let for much of a honeymoon period for Carson Wentz, but I think looking at Sam Bradford, again, it kind of goes back to the Andrew Luck thing and how fortunate the Colts are to have a quarterback like him. Yeah. You don't have that diva-ness and that sort of personality. And honestly, when I look at Sam Bradford, I mean, he's a guy that I don't think is too demonstrative or on the surface, he doesn't seem like a bad, locker room guy, but obviously his comments here lately speak otherwise. So
yeah, he's spoiled.
If I'm Doug Peterson in Philadelphia, I think you got to look long and hard about throwing Carson Wentz in there from day one and live with some of the rookie struggles that maybe Peyton Manning had or other top quarterbacks, and just kind of go with the growing pains, as hard as that might be for Philly fans to swallow right now.
Yeah, we're talking to Kevin Bowen, at radio and TV personality from the Indianapolis Colts, also in charge of their website. If you really want to go and see a great website and how it is built and how it is run, you go to Colts.com, and you'll see this young man's smiling little face all over the place. Hey, a year ago, Tony Romo wanted to have his fantasy football league party in Las Vegas, and the NFL said, nah, you're not going to have it there. Now, all of a sudden, there's major talk. Now there's major talk about the Raiders, which would be fitting because I lived in Vegas for 10 years, and I got to tell you something. There's Raider fans all over Vegas, all over the place.
Right.
I
think it's I think it's very fitting. I think it makes sense on several levels. It is crazy, and I almost forgot about that whole Romo fantasy football thing in Vegas that really looked like it was going to happen. Then all of a sudden, last minute, the NFL pulls the plug on it, and now Mark Davis, the Raiders owner, is leaving the spring meetings today in Charlotte, and it seems like if anything, he has owners almost backing him, and not putting their foot down and saying no, we can't have a team in Vegas, this and that, and you obviously have seen it firsthand, Gary, but I do think putting the Raiders down there would kind of unite their fan base because they do have a lot of Southern California fans. They obviously have the Bay Area fans as well, and then fans that have sprinkled into Vegas as well. So that, to me, is kind of the next domino to watch is what happens with Oakland. Because they were very hesitant about even going back to the Coliseum for this year. They've made it clear that they don't want to be there. St. Louis doesn't seem like an option to have an NFL team. If San Diego does stay in San Diego, what's the next domino city-wise now that LA has been taken up? And I don't think two teams can immediately thrive in Los Angeles. So I think the Vegas thing makes a lot of sense. And, of course, as we talked about earlier, I just don't think it's feasible right now to send a team to London.
No, I think St. Louis is done. They had the Cardinals. They had the Rams. And it wasn't anything the city of St. Louis did. They had great support. It's just that the owner has his businesses in L.A. He sees the business opportunity where he can make millions of dollars. The city of L.A. is helping him out with a lot of money. But I'm going to tell you something you said earlier in the program, and it's true. I lived in L.A. for a number of years as well. And I was there when the Raiders were there. And there is a lot of places to spend your dollar. And you know, Kevin, as well as anybody, even in Indianapolis, it's not cheap to take a family of four to see an NFL game.
Correct. And I think that's why when you saw those three teams that were in the final running for LA, I think the Rams made the most sense. Kroenke obviously had a plan that the owners loved, and I think what his vision is for Inglewood is something that there's a ton of potential there. In terms of, hosting the Super Bowl now is announced today as they'll host, I think it's Super Bowl 2021, I want to say.
Right, yes.
And then, and then potentially, could you have the draft out there? Could you have the combine? I don't think the combine would necessarily go out there because Indy has the infrastructure in such close proximity. And the medical aspect of things is so key. But I think the Rams made the most sense because they had the history there. As they try to kind of now combine that older generation of fans to the younger people that are out in Los Angeles. And I just couldn't see two teams surviving there. And frankly, I can't see it happening at all in the immediate future. I think it's going to take a little bit of time. I think it's difficult for, two NBA franchises and a hockey franchise and a baseball franchise. And, you have Anaheim that's right there. And, just a little bit down the road, obviously, San Diego. So, I think it was smart by the NFL maybe not to rush into things by sending San Diego or Oakland there right away. Hopefully San Diego can get things figured out with local wise and what they can do with potentially building a city there or building a stadium there. And then who knows, maybe we will be calling the Oakland Raiders the Las Vegas Raiders in the near
Raiders.
Future.
As Boomer says, the Raiders.
You got it down, Pat.
I'll tell you. You know what, Kevin? Tommy and I are often on the set, and you're gonna go back. Anyway, he's such a Raider fan, and he loves the San Diego Charge. I can't imagine San Diego, one of the original AFL teams, in any other city but San Diego. I'll be perfectly honest. Oh no, they were in L.A. at first. They were in Los Angeles. Then they moved down to San Diego. But I got to tell you, I just can't imagine them anyplace else. But as long as the Colts stay where they are, I think that'll be great. Last time we talked, and we've got about 10 minutes left here. Last time we talked about the collective bargaining agreement and how that has changed the game because the players are limited in practice, how often they can wear the pads, how often they can do this. They can only practice for so many hours out of the week. Have you noticed a difference in the, not necessarily exhibition games, but in the first 3 or 4 games of the regular season, a difference in the level of competition? Maybe it takes the teams now another week or two longer into the regular season to really be in shape and ready to rock and roll. I know players do it 24/7, 12 months out of the year, but do you notice a difference with some of these restrictions on players, what they can and cannot do in practice?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's really hard to truly evaluate just because, unless you compared it side by side, screen by screen, it's hard to say, okay, this is back when, full pads were allowed X amount of days at training camp. And this is nowadays when you can't put on the pads for 4 or 5 days into training camp. And really, I can't think of the Colts putting on full pads more than about a handful of days last year. And I think that goes for just about every team around the NFL, because there is that fine line. It's okay, how physical do you go in the off season? Can you afford to risk your star players going down with these fluke, freakish type injuries? And some of it is non-contact stuff that you just can't even predict. Vic Ballard, the Colts starting running back a couple years ago, tears his ACL on 2 non-contact drills back-to-back years, and he had never missed a game of football due to injury, high school, college, his first year in the NFL coming into that. So I understand coaches that are frustrated by it because they would like to be a little bit more physical, but it seems like every time that somebody goes on one of those tangents, you hear about another, injury at training camp, or, Sammy Watkins hurting his foot, or, all this stuff that seems like comes up. So I can't see it changing too much. I don't think all of a sudden you're going to all of a sudden ramp up the physicality and have full pads more on more. I think it's the safety of the game is always being taken into measure, and I think that's only going to rise. And if that means that the quality of play maybe is a little bit less, in the early weeks of the season, then just so be it. But I don't think the average fan is going to notice too much of it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, well, do me a favor, would you? Because we got a couple of minutes left here. When you see Coach Pagano, just tell him he doesn't know me from Adam, but just tell him every time I see him on the field, I'm so glad he's still with us, and I'm so glad he survived. And anytime you play the Miami Dolphins and you beat them bad, that's okay by me.
Yeah, it is. It is a remarkable story that here he is now signing his extension back in January. And I know we talked about it earlier in the show about those early bye weeks. The Colts had a week 4 bye week back in 2012 when Coach Pagano came down with leukemia, and that was only 2 teams in the NFL had that early of a bye week. And you wonder if the Colts didn't have that bye week and they were 1-2 at that point, and Pagano was a first-year head coach, does he listen to his wife and say, okay, you need to go to the doctor, or is he stubborn and is he saying, no, this is the job I've dreamed of. We're 1-2. We got the Green Bay defending, Super Bowl. I think Green Bay had won the Super Bowl the year before, or at least had been in the conference championship game. Do you say, I got to be here for prep and I don't have time to go to the doctor, this and that. So, yes, it's a great story here. I know that, he would have been very highly sought after had the Colts decide to let him go, but they've brought him back, and Ryan Grigson an extension as well with an offensive lineman filled draft that followed a couple of months later. So we'll see if the Colts can keep Andrew Luck upright. I do think this team is the favorite in the AFC South, and it'll be interesting to see how the AFC in general plays out, because I think there are some question marks for the elite teams in this conference. In terms of Brady, does he get to 4 games? Pittsburgh, can they bounce back with their kind of late season injuries that they had to deal with last year? And then Denver, of course, not really knowing what their quarterback situation is. So I do think as we sit here today on May 24th, that the AFC is relatively wide open. This team kind of wrap up their off-season programs.
I think so, too. We have been enjoying Kevin Bowen, the radio and TV personality for the Indianapolis Colts. Kevin, the hour has gone by. I want to thank you so very much. You're going to be back with us in the fall. I know that. So thank you again for taking the time to join us here on The Express. And for all of you out there, you can join me on Facebook at Gary Allen, ALAN. I don't know, Kevin, are you on Facebook?
I am not, but on Twitter you can find me at KBowen Colts. That's KBOWEN Colts. That's where you can kind of get all your links to Colts.com. So yes. I appreciate you having me, Gary, and we will definitely have to do it again in the fall.
All right, sir. Thank you very much. You can also check this show out as well as any of my past shows on YouTube.com, Gary Allen, The Express Interviews. Thursday night, this program will repeat itself on our sister station, DiversityBroadcastNetwork.com at 7 p.m. ProgressiveVoices.com also has this show coming up towards the end of the week. If you're in TuneIn.com, go in there, TMV Cafe, register down there as one of your favorites, and you can listen to this and any other show on this network anytime you want. Until next week, I just want to say thank you for joining us here on The Express. This is Gary Allen. Please take care of yourselves and each other.
You've been listening to The Express with Gary Allen. Join us here every Tuesday night at 10 for more captivating talk with Gary Allen. See you next time on The Express.